Right, everybody, let's get today's program started. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. I'm your host, Chris Smith. I work at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, who partners with the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education every Wednesday at noon to bring you what has been a long-running and very exciting lecture series. The museum and the Environmental Education Office within the Department of Environmental Quality. Gosh, we've been bringing this program together for, well, now a few years, hosting it on site and now bringing it to you live on the web where anyone, anywhere can come and participate in the program. We have a great time every week meeting interesting people and learning interesting things in the world of science, nature, conservation, wildlife, wild places. But today I'm actually really excited about this presentation and today's group of speakers. You're going to be hearing from 3 different voices today because today's topic is, in fact, environmental education, and specifically how the AmeriCorps program helps local communities on a national scale to bring environmental education to the forefront. And do what maybe a lot of the folks who are tuned into this particular program love to do, which is get conservation, get wildlife, wild places, science and nature out there to the public. So today's going to be a great program. I'm glad that you're here. Remember that as we go throughout today's show, whether you're watching on YouTube or over on the museum's Facebook page, you can leave questions and comments for our guest speakers as we go along. So jump into the chat, maybe just like say hi, let me know where you're watching the program from. But also, as questions pop into your head, type them up into the chat and into the comments, whether on YouTube or on Facebook. At the end of the presentations today, we'll actually take your questions. I've got those chat boxes pulled up right over here. I'll grab your questions and share them with today's guest speakers. So it's an interactive show. That's what I like about it. Let me bring in today's guests. 3 people that I know you're excited to meet. First off, I want you to meet Nick DiColandrea. Nick is an AmeriCorps project director for the Conservation Trust for North Carolina. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here. Hey, everybody.
Excellent stuff. Next, you'll be hearing from Jan Pender. Jan is the Conservation Legacy Eastern Region Development Director. Jan, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Really excited to hear about your experiences. And then our third guest today is Hannah Barg. Hannah is the Stormwater Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Clean Water Education Partnership. And the coolest job title is working with the Youth Engaging in the Science of Resilience program at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And Hannah's an AmeriCorps alum. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate you giving my long title.
Right. Well, I had to make sure that I worked the museum into it somehow and make us the most special in all of that. But glad to have all 3 of you on the show. I'm excited to hear your experience, perspectives, and insights about the AmeriCorps program, environmental education programs and practices. So, Nick, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and listening in today. We're really just happy to be here and tell everybody what goes on in environmental education across the state of North Carolina. We're happy to talk about other projects that have occurred across the country because there are far more projects happening around the country than just North Carolina when it comes to environmental education. But we're definitely happy to be a few of the programs here that operate are AmeriCorps members in the state of North Carolina. So I'm really thrilled to be here and talk more about this kind of longstanding relationship we've also had with the Office of Environmental Education and have worked hand in hand for many years now, developing young leaders to move on from even AmeriCorps to careers in public service around the state. So yeah, we're really excited. This is gonna be a lot of fun. So I have a presentation I'm gonna share with everybody. I have a few slides at first, and I'm gonna turn it over to Jan to talk a little bit about her program. And we'll have a good time from there. And I think Hannah's got some better picture slides than I do. So I'm excited to see what she's got for us today. So yeah, I'm the current project or program director for the Conservation Trust for North Carolina's AmeriCorps program called Resilience Corps North Carolina. We're an AmeriCorps program that receives funding from the governor's office, the governor's office volunteer commission or volunteer NC, and as is Jan's program. And I'll let her talk more about her program too. But we are one of more than a dozen land trusts in the state of North Carolina. We have what we like to call a sister program out in the mountains called Project Conserve, based with another land trust called Conserving Carolina, and they also run an AmeriCorps program. They couldn't be here today to present. They had some conflicts, but they also run a fantastic program out in the mountain counties. While we do have some positions ourselves there, we focus across the state, which makes our program unique with a few others across the AmeriCorps state landscape that we operate across the state. So I'm going to take some time just to give everybody kind of a background of what AmeriCorps is, what it does, the different branches and such that we have in AmeriCorps North Carolina. Not bore everybody with too many details because it can be very detailed but focused, but also give you some idea of what Resilience Corps North Carolina does for environmental education and has done in the past 7 or 8 years that I've been running the program. It's been a while, so can't remember now. So what is AmeriCorps? AmeriCorps is a national movement around public service in communities across the country, not just North Carolina, not just the states, but also the territories such as Puerto Rico and Guam. So you have a movement from a federal agency was called the Corporation for National Community Service, went through a name change, and now it's just called AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps members address critical community needs, whether in the environment or public safety, disaster response, public health, like responding to COVID, many things. If you can think of a community need, community service, AmeriCorps members are probably most likely 100% working on it somewhere in the country. And there's a few branches under AmeriCorps that you should just be aware of. And you probably saw a couple of different logos for this for AmeriCorps. We're going through a logo change. Some of my slides have an old one, so you get to see all the fun stuff. There's really added right now 3 big branches of AmeriCorps as they are: AmeriCorps Vista, AmeriCorps State and National, and AmeriCorps NCCC. If you've been in the public sector before, state, local, national government, or nonprofits, you probably have heard of all of these branches. And these are the different things that they do. We all have different responsibilities when it comes to responding to community needs. And because they take the responses take different forms, right? Like you can't, AmeriCorps is not about solving every issue with the same solution, which is kind of one of the best parts of AmeriCorps. And running a program is that you can really tailor your members' experience in your program to those needs of the community and how your mission and goal as a nonprofit or agency should relate to that. And so with that, even AmeriCorps also has different aspects of its programming, right? I'm not going to read through these verbatim, but just to give you folks an idea of what it looks like to be a Vista. Vistas are 12-month full service. They have a smaller cost to your organizations that are out there in the field supporting an AmeriCorps Vista member that you might have seen before, serving in a state or local government or a nonprofit. And they typically do what is called indirect service, which is not a great term for it, but they're typically your capacity builders behind the scenes, the folks that are building the structures and foundations to alleviate poverty and to bring people out of poverty in communities as their main focus. Compared to state programs like Jan's and myself, we have members that are doing direct service activities, such as mentoring, recruiting volunteers, giving environmental education in K-12 class settings. And we also have different levels of commitment. You can have an AmeriCorps member in a state program serve for 3 months, or sometimes just a month, if it's a disaster placement, but 3 months to 12 months. And it also has a different level of match for programs running them. So Jan and I's program have a different level of commitment to the federal government to be good stewards of their resources. And then you have NCCC, which is really more, I would say, crew-based, and they're based out of different regions in the country. They do lots of things as well around infrastructure, disaster relief, urban and rural development. But instead of having typically what you would have with state programs in environmental education, which is maybe 1 or 2 people working at a location, you would have a whole crew of 8 or 10 members from for North Carolina, for example, from Jackson, Mississippi, they pull folks from around the country, typically the Southeast, to come to the town of Wake Forest or Gardner or Highlands or Manteo to do something that town needs work on. And again, the biggest parts for these types of service years is that what is attractive. So many different people looking for public service opportunities. That if you look at this as somebody who's trying to engage in that first step of service in your public career, you have many different options. You can do a 12-month full-time position. You can do something shorter. You can do 10 months or 3 months or 6 months, and you can find all these things on AmeriCorps.gov if you're looking for those service opportunities. And that really does help make AmeriCorps so attractive to local community leaders, nonprofits, and agencies, state, federal agencies, because you can really address your community needs with types of positions that are going to be the most applicable to your solution. And that has always been one of the benefits for being a state program too, is being able to work with partners in the past and say, you need somebody to work typically in the summer months or in the fall months. Let's have you have a member for 6 months or less. And finally, what members do and what members have done in our program, and I'll let Jen talk about theirs, but with Resilience Corps North Carolina, we've been established for since our iteration when we used to work hand in hand with the state government as a program way back in the day. We do environmental education, and that's our bread and butter as our first performance measure that we report to AmeriCorps on. Is that we are looking for projects and for ideas that have an unmet need in storm education and K-12 schools. We are looking to help coastal erosion, wildlife education, stewardship of public lands, whether on a land trust or state-owned or locally owned. We have gone into community resiliency planning around climate change, especially on the coast, but we were also looking for partners to work on that on the mountains. Our members, and Hannah being one of our alumni, and she can talk to this too, in her cohort probably about all the different things that cohort did varied. There wasn't just one type of environmental education activity that they did in the field, because again, the needs of the town of West Jefferson and Durham are vastly different when it comes to the environmental structures that are there and what their community members need to help both young people and people that have been living there their whole lives understand their commitment to stewardship and protection of the environment. So with Resilience Corps North Carolina, we take the same mantra of how can we use AmeriCorps and use the knowledge that we've had as a leading program in the state to facilitate a better environment for everybody in your community through a position in environmental education or capacity building. So that is our program in a nutshell. Jan, I'll turn it over to you because that's all I got. I know you've got plenty of stuff with CCNC.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everybody. Nick explained AmeriCorps really well, and actually Conservation Corps North Carolina started with Conservation Trust for North Carolina. We are now an organization that's part of Conservation Legacy, which is a national organization that helps to support local Corps programs. And before I go into our mission here in North Carolina, I think it's worth explaining what a Corps, and that is a CORPS, organization is. It is a legacy of the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, that you probably remember reading about during the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. And it was a way to put young people to work. At that time, it was young men to work, doing work on public lands. Well, that's pretty much what we do today. We put young men and women to work through AmeriCorps on projects that help to restore, improve, and preserve public lands. So our mission in North Carolina is to connect youth and young adults to conservation service work that benefits the North Carolina communities and connects them to nature and the outdoors. And our participants work on projects that to preserve, restore, and improve those public lands and trails across North Carolina. We're very focused on all those places that our state loves to go play and recreate and enjoy nature. The next slide is we have basically 4 types of programs. We have residential and day youth conservation crews, and we call a small group a crew, residential and day adult conservation crews, and veteran crews, as well as interns like Nick. Our day crews are just what they sound. You work during the day, you go home at night. But we have residential crews, and for both youth and young adults, those crews are typically out for 9 days at a time camping near their project site. That's why we call it residential. So in addition to working on a powerful project that impacts a lot of people, you're also exposing people to nature through an immersive experience of camping outdoors for these longer periods of time. And people often find themselves not missing some of the things that we take for granted every day, like our digital devices and the way we are part of an ongoing news program in our lives. People always tell me that they enjoy the opportunity at this age to detach from a lot of the things that they are usually involved with for 9 days at a time and just be outdoors working in nature. Our crew-based program, there's typically 4 to 6 participants. They're AmeriCorps members. They work under the supervision of one assistant AmeriCorps leader. That person is trained. And then we have a staff crew leader, and they're not AmeriCorps. That's because they're supervising the other AmeriCorps leaders. We do a pipeline kind of training where we hope that our crew members will graduate and become assistant crew leaders, and then one day a crew leader. They all work together on one project that's a high priority natural resource project. Those projects can include a variety of work. Some of it's facility improvements in our parks. This is a park improvement project in Raleigh. Other projects are trail construction and maintenance. We do a lot of work for the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, state parks, restoring trails, making them more sustainable, and building new trails in places that are often not being served in a public recreation way, where trails can add a lot to a community because of the way it involves people in the community and provides a place for good outdoor exercise. We do a lot of forest management. This includes some storm recovery. When we have a storm that comes through and trees are down, we will help agencies and communities go out and remove those trees. This involves certifying our members in saw work, which is often a very valuable job skill that they can take into their career. And we do prescribed burn work. We work under the North Carolina Forest Service to do prescribed burn work across the state. And this is also a very valuable work skill. Our folks get red carded, what's a term that's used in the Forest Service that enables them to be called up on these wildland firefighting projects out that you often hear about out in the West, but they happen here in the East. And they can plug into any kind of Forest Service effort on those wildland fires because we have them trained. It's also a very good job skill for them to continue to find good paying work in the future. We do a lot of invasive species removal. As folks probably know, we have a lot of invasive species in North Carolina. And so this is an effort that our folks do to help agencies, especially our communities, try and restore the native species so that wildlife can thrive there and get a hold on the invasive species they don't take over. And then we do simple habitat restoration projects. And I say simple, they can be a variety of things, from stream restoration to putting together a community area where there's wildlife habitat, like pollinator gardens. And they can be more complicated. We worked this summer with the Conservation Trust on innovative climate resilient habitat restoration in the town of Princeville. And then we are sometimes called up on disaster recovery, which is a Federal Environmental Management Association job where we go in for short periods of time, usually after a severe storm or hurricane, and do not only the tree removal, but lots of cleanup because we already have the skills and our members are ready to do that and they've been trained to do that. And the most recent work we've started is our living shoreline work, where we've been working on the coast to do sustainable coastal restoration through creating living shorelines instead of putting in big concrete bulwarks. These are marsh plantings, oyster reef creation, and marine debris cleanup that enables the coast to be more resilient to the ever-increasing number and severity of hurricanes and other storms on our coast. And we do a number of affinity crews. We try to help folks be as comfortable as possible in our crews because they are small groups. So we put together all female crews. We have Indigenous crews. We have crews that are LGBTQ. We try to create crews so that everybody feels safe, welcome, and can have an experience where they feel connected to everyone that on their crew. Youth are typically 15 to 18, and they're paid on an hourly basis. They are not AmeriCorps members, and they typically work in the summer 4 to 8 weeks. And then our young adults, because they are AmeriCorps members, they do get the AmeriCorps Living Stipend, the Education Award, and it's a lot more focus on those skills that will help them start a career pathway. And then we have interns as well. We do work on a variety of interns from 3 months to a full year, helping, as Nick just described, agencies, community organizations, nonprofits fill gaps through our AmeriCorps members who can bring skills from either their studies or what they're passionate about to help that community organization fill a gap in the organization. So I think that is a good summary of our core. I'll turn it over to our next guest, Hannah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jan. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. All right. So thanks, Nick and Jan, for giving kind of an overview of your programs and sort of the 10,000 foot view of what AmeriCorps is in our state. I'm going to zoom in here and talk about my experience working on site at the Clean Water Education Partnership as an AmeriCorps service member. I now work there as part-time staff member. So I'll talk a little bit about that and how my AmeriCorps journey helped me get that position, as well as share some broader reflections about this program. So yeah, I worked, I served as an AmeriCorps member from 2019 to 2020 with the Clean Water Education Partnership, which was an AmeriCorps placement with the CTNC AmeriCorps program that Nick helps run. It was not Resilience Corps at that time, but now it is. So it's changed names and focus a little bit since I was a member there, but we actually are going to get a new AmeriCorps member at our organization starting in September, which is really exciting. I'm looking forward to continuing our relationship with CTNC for that position. So I always like to start talking about my AmeriCorps journey with what got me there. And so I graduated from Goshen College with a degree in environmental science. This is a small liberal arts school in Indiana. I graduated and really felt lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my degree. It felt really broad. I didn't feel like I had a lot of good career guidance in my college experience. And so it took me a little bit to figure out what I wanted to do. Eventually, I landed a job at Conserve School, which was a semester boarding school in northern Wisconsin for high school students. And I taught an environmental stewardship class there. And that really sparked my interest in environmental education. So that's kind of where I discovered that this was my passion and what I wanted to pursue as a career. Fast forward a few more years, and I landed a CTNC AmeriCorps position in North Carolina. I moved from northern Wisconsin to North Carolina, very different climates. I went from 6 months of winter to 6 months of hot summer, which was definitely a shock for me. And I didn't know anything about North Carolina when I moved here. It was a very new state to me. I had visited once in high school when I was looking at colleges, and that was it. So this was a really big kind of shift in terms of where I was living, the ecosystems. I was very unfamiliar with the plant and animal species here. And so AmeriCorps really provided an opportunity for me to dive headfirst into learning about the ecosystems, learning how to teach environmental education in the state, and also just broadly getting to know the state. I did a lot of traveling in my position, and so it was a really great way to get to know the state quickly. So like I said, I served at the Clean Water Education Partnership, which was my sort of my service placement. The Clean Water Education Partnership is a program that's a part of the Triangle J Council of Governments, which is a regional government in the Triangle. And this is just one of many programs and focus areas that we have at Triangle J. So I just wanted to provide that context for you all. So some pictures of me in action. I did a lot of different things in my AmeriCorps service. The focus of my position at the Clean Water Education Partnership was doing stormwater education in 40 local governments. So it was very broad. I pretty much did it was very different from the work I was doing at Conserve School, where I was working with students for a whole semester. I went from getting to know 60 students really well to working with thousands of youth and maybe only talking to them for 5 minutes. So this was a really big shift. I went from sort of the deep environmental education to the wide reaching environmental education. On the top left, you can see me tabling at the Fiesta del Pueblo in Raleigh. That's one of the main roles I had, was to go to community events in our local governments and teach people about stormwater, hand out our stormwater brochures, do some quick kind of tabling activities with people. You see me working our macroinvertebrate spin the wheel there at that table. I also went to after school programs and libraries and taught kids about the water cycle. So that's the top right photo. That was one of my favorite programs I did at the Clayton Community Center, one of our local government partners. Bottom left is a lesson that I designed for high school students to explore stormwater on their school campus if they didn't have access to a creek. And so this was an opportunity for them to engage with stormwater through looking into storm drains and thinking about the way that water moves over the buildings and hard surfaces and soft surfaces present on their school campus. And then the bottom right, I'm working with a group of students doing a river basin timeline activity that I also developed. So my experience at Conserve School actually really helped me prep me for my role at AmeriCorps. I was familiar with developing lesson plans and kind of developing a curriculum. And so I really brought that experience to my AmeriCorps position and developed some new lessons to work specifically with high school students, which was the population I was most interested in engaging, and a population that we hadn't previously reached with our education efforts at the Clean Water Education Partnership. So just really quickly at a glance, these are just sort of the overview numbers of all of the people and programs that I interacted with and did over my AmeriCorps term. This is like pretty typical of all the AmeriCorps members in my cohort that were doing education work like me. We reached thousands of people with our work. It's pretty amazing how far-reaching these positions are and just how many youth were engaging in our programs. So I did 21 community programs. I did 11 school visits. I engaged with 3,000 people, and I did a total of 108 program hours. And just a reminder that this was also during when COVID started. So my AmeriCorps term, March 2020 was a part of, and to July 2020, I was working remotely. And so I really had to pivot and do very different style of programming as an AmeriCorps member when I was working from home. So really kind of focused more on the website and social media and doing sort of virtual programming opportunities, as well as providing at-home resources for parents and teachers to use with their students or their children. So sort of an overview of some of the accomplishments that I had during my AmeriCorps term. One of them was I expanded programming to underserved communities. So I visited a total of 6 Title I schools, and I think that was about 500 students that of the 3,000 people that I engaged with were students at Title I schools. That was, again, a group that we hadn't reached before with our direct education efforts. So I expanded that, the connections to teachers at those schools and engaging with those youth. I also created standard aligned lessons. So the storm drain lesson I talked about and the river basin timeline activity were 2 of the lessons I developed for high school students. And all of those lessons are on our website now. They're open access. Teachers can use them in their classroom, or they can request me to come and facilitate that lesson with their students. I also provided virtual programming and resources during COVID-19, as I mentioned. I assisted with the writing of 2 grants, and I updated and restructured our website. I engaged with new partners that we hadn't reached before, and I increased our social media presence. So prior to my role with AmeriCorps, we were using another Council of Governments was running our social media account. So I took those over and started running them during COVID as part of our virtual education and outreach efforts. So yeah, my AmeriCorps term, as you can see, very far reaching. I did a lot of different activities. I wanted to touch a little bit on what I'm doing now and where I've been since my AmeriCorps term ended. So that's a picture of me singing my Stormwater Song, which you can find on our YouTube page. That was one of the virtual programs that I did. That was really fun. And I actually have been able to perform the song live at a few library and after school visits with students. So that was a really fun work at home project for me that I continue to use in my current role as the education and outreach coordinator at the Clean Water Education Partnership. So I did get hired on part-time after my AmeriCorps term, which ended up working really well because of the work from home scenario with COVID. We didn't end up having an AmeriCorps member over this past year. So that's why I'm really excited that we're getting another AmeriCorps member this year. And I'm going to be helping supervise that person, which is really exciting for me because I'll get to bring some of my insights and lessons learned when I was an AmeriCorps member and use that to help train in our new AmeriCorps member. I also have a part-time job at the NC Museum of Natural Sciences, which Chris mentioned. I work with high school students in a Teen Climate Ambassador program. So engaging youth in learning about regional and local climate change issues and thinking about climate solutions. We just kind of wrapped up our year-long pilot of that program, but I'm helping develop curriculum for that now that will be available for environmental educators across the state later this year. So please keep your eye out for that. And then additionally, I'm using my Siegel Education Award that I got as part of my AmeriCorps program to pay for grad school. So I'm getting my master's in experiential and outdoor education at Western Carolina University. It's a new program, and I'm doing my thesis research on youth climate change education. So really, AmeriCorps helped set up a lot of these connections that I have now in my current jobs and made it possible for me to go to grad school and make it more affordable. Okay, so lastly, and I think this will be a good transition into our Q&A session, I just wanted to share some sort of overall reflections about what it was like for me serving as an AmeriCorps member, as a part of a cohort. I personally had a really positive experience with AmeriCorps. Nick and Nick's coworker, Lacey, were amazing supervisors. And I really think that their leadership and their selection of our sites, like the Clean Water Education Partnership, really helped create a super strong AmeriCorps program. I know other people who have not had as positive experiences with AmeriCorps because they felt isolated and not a part of a community, which is definitely possible because all of us pretty much were serving at different locations. But Nick and Lacey really tried to keep our camaraderie strong in our cohort, especially during COVID. And we did like weekly lunch meetings, and we got to see each other a lot, even though we were placed all across the state. And it was great to be able to go to professional development events with some of my cohort members, or even collaborate with them on some efforts. Like there were a couple of folks in my cohort who I collaborated with on a litter curriculum for Durham Public Schools. So there were a lot of opportunities for us to learn from each other and learn from our leaders and our mentors in the program too. And yeah, so I highly recommend the CTNC Resilience Corps program. I think it's a really strong state and national program. And I'm one of like 5 people in my particular cohort who went on to work at their site full-time or part-time, or served again as an AmeriCorps member at the same site or a different site. And so I think that also speaks to the quality of people that are sought out for these positions and are taking these positions. We're doing a lot of really amazing environmental education work across the state as people who are relatively new to the EE field. So I can't speak highly enough about the CTNC program. And I'd be happy to answer any other specific questions about my experience, but just wanted to put that out there that if you're thinking about doing an AmeriCorps program, this is a great one to do.
All right. Hannah, thank you very much. Nick and Jan also, great presentations. Thanks for the insight that you shared here. And what a cool experience, Hannah, that you had. Like you got to do some really cool and interesting stuff.
Yeah, I did. It was pretty amazing. I don't think I was expecting to do as much as I did during my AmeriCorps term when I started. It was a surprise to me too.
That's really cool stuff. Before we turn to the Q&A segment, I want to hear from one more AmeriCorps member who we're bringing into the program via a short video. And we'll get to see some of the work that they did working in the field. Brent, roll the tape.
I'm a part of a crew for Conservation Corps North Carolina. I'm a staff crew leader, and we're working with the North Carolina Coastal Federation. And we are working with them on doing living shoreline projects, which is basically creating human-made oyster reefs to protect the shoreline from erosion, to build back up the oyster population and thus the fish and other marine invertebrate populations. So how you build a living shoreline, and what we've been doing with the Coastal Federation, is basically using piles of oysters like this that have been donated from places like restaurants. We essentially bag up old oysters in these mesh plastic bags, and they are used as essentially like bricks for the human-made oyster and the living shorelines. So yeah, just doing a bunch of work on the coast with amazing partners.
Cool stuff, right? What an interesting program. And to get to be able to do such different kinds of work and really important work too. Like Hannah, you were talking about the work of bringing stormwater education to students all across the state, or, like actually building like living seawalls on the coast in order to stop coastal erosion issues. Like these programs really get people out into the world doing really interesting, but also really important work. So Nick, Jan, I'm kind of curious as to how you source these projects and then place AmeriCorps members into them. Like, how do you give a student or a young person such a broad range of experiences in order to really set them up for a career or life in education or conservation?
I'll start by saying that we talk to all kinds of partners that are natural resource partners. We work with the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, state parks, local governments, nonprofits like the North Carolina Coastal Federation. We talk to them about their needs, but then we also talk to them about the education potential of those projects. And from there, we start to work with them on a partnership in which we bring them capacity building, and then they bring our members an experience that is unique and in many ways transformational.
And I would say the same in regard to how we source these projects and we find these partners. We have an open process where we over the years have developed relationships across the state with different organizations and different networks to show, hey, we have opportunities for you to partner with us to get an AmeriCorps member around, like Jan was saying, what is important in your community. Is it habitat restoration? Is it environmental education around a specific topic, wildlife, stormwater, erosion, community resilience, climate change in your community? And your community can be defined more than geographic. It can be socioeconomical. It can be based on a whole region and not just your town or city, but let's say the whole mountain kind of region, how the ecosystem works with itself there. Or we have many partners that in the past have worked along the many rivers in North Carolina, in the basins. And so it can be more than just that small geographic location in a township. And the process really is for us, and I feel like lots of AmeriCorps programs are the same way, that we are kind of in a partnership with that organization, as we call the host site. So for example, TJ Cog was a host site for us. We would recruit equally a person like Hannah and open up the application process and see who's there and try to find out who would like this position and then jointly interview them and see if they would be a good fit, both for this need, for this organization's purpose and their own culture, and AmeriCorps. Do they know what national service is? Does this seem like an opportunity for them that's going to help them grow as well as the community they're serving? And that's kind of how we have sourced partners and members in the past. And honestly, typically, many of the programs that operate AmeriCorps members, whether it's environmental education or others, do it in a similar way.
That's excellent stuff to hear. I mean, working at the Museum of Natural Sciences, I've learned how important these cross-agency, cross-institution organization partnerships really are. I mean, like this program is two government agencies working together just to put you folks on the screen to learn about these things. But it really is all of the connections and the partnerships that all of these institutions and organizations bring together, and then bringing together all of the great resources that we have, like AmeriCorps members, like smart, passionate people to bring this stuff to the public with lots of energy and expertise. So I really just think that's great. Okay.
Yeah, I think those partnerships are also really helpful for AmeriCorps members too. I mean, it gave me exposure to local government, to being a service member, to working at in an organization with a lot of different city planners, as well as getting exposure to the other site locations that AmeriCorps members were there. So I think it's not only great for the organizations to do the partnerships, but also for the members too.
That's great stuff. Excellent work. Okay, let me throw some audience questions your way. There's a few that have popped up here in the chat. The first one is from the North Carolina Coastal Federation. Hi, folks. They want to hear the Stormwater Song, Hannah. And I might have goaded them in the chat to get a live performance of that. Maybe in a minute. We'll give you time to get your guitar. But also, they want to know where they can actually find some of that curriculum that you developed that you mentioned was online.
Yeah, so I can share the link to the Stormwater Song and our website, which is nccleanwater.com. And that's where you can find the curriculum things. And then Chris or Brenton, if you want to share that with the in the chat on the YouTube page, you can do that. I'll drop the links in. And I am not prepared to sing the the Stormwater Song live right now, but I do have a YouTube recording of it that I can share.
I understand. There's not enough time to sell tickets, get a venue. So maybe one day in the future, we'll live with the YouTube video. That'll be great. And yeah, drop the link in the chat here with us, and then I'll post it over on social media for everybody. That'll work just fine. Okay, Lisa wants to know, what would you all say are the top 3 benefits AmeriCorps and or Conservation Corps members take away from their service experience? I don't know who to put up first for this one. Maybe Nick, do you have 3 benefits you think you could point to?
Yeah, sure. I think, okay, first benefit would be networking. And I think if you work in state, local government or nonprofits, networking is definitely one of those things that is highly valuable for you in that career track. And as Hannah mentioned earlier, most of the AmeriCorps programs are partnerships, dual, triple partnerships, quadruple partnerships, where you're working with a state park that's working with, or you're working on federal land, or you're working with a nonprofit that has regional approach, you're working with a state government, and then you have AmeriCorps. And then you have that network within AmeriCorps as well as an alumni of a national service program that currently has 75,000 people every year. Legislation has been passed recently to increase that to a lot more than that, maybe 250,000 in the next couple of years. I can't recall the exact number, but networking would be number 1. Number 2 would be the education award. AmeriCorps members are right now not paid incredibly well, depending on the program size. That is something that also federal legislation has been passed to improve. But the education award has been something that really turns folks that are looking for the next opportunity and looking for that step into public service to help pay off student loans or go back to school. Many of my AmeriCorps members have either gone back to school for a master's or a PhD, and one of them, then they get published and you're just like, wow, that was great. Or they use it to pay off student loans. As all of us know, student loans are incredibly burdensome for this generation. And the third one would be skills, experience. The experience that Jan mentioned her members get, what our members have to do, and what Hannah identified in her positions is that there is nothing like having both responsibilities to accomplish something for a federal program and knowing that you're really accomplishing something meaningful in your first maybe job out of school, or not the first one, but maybe the first full-time job, but you're also building an immense skill set thanks to this opportunity because of the work you're trying to produce and the professional development you're getting in that line of work. So those would be my top 3 things. Jan, what about you? What do you think?
I would agree, and I would say skills, in some cases even hard certifications that are paid for, and you can put them on your resume, and in some cases that gets you a job immediately because you have a certification to do that job. We also, for some of our federal partners, our members get preferred hiring status, which is the same as veterans, and that means that they are ahead of the law in the queue for a USA job with many federal agencies, and that can be tremendously helpful if you're trying to get your foot in the door in one of these agencies like the Park Service or the Forest Service. And then I think there, as Nick mentioned, there is a leadership component to this that is probably unlike any other. You have a lot of mentoring, you have a good supervision, nobody's letting you off completely on your own, but you've got to figure a lot of things out on your own. And that is a tremendous skill that you can take into any job and produces a lot of self-confidence. You've got to work as a team, your communication skills grow. I just think there's a really good personal and professional growth opportunity in these positions.
Yeah, I would add to that, Jan. I agree. It really, my AmeriCorps experience, I was working incredibly independently, even though I had good mentorship and leadership from both AmeriCorps and my site. I had to fail a lot, and it was a big challenge for me to have such a big task in front of me and break it up into small like steps to get to where I needed to go. And there were some moments during my AmeriCorps term where I wanted to quit, and it was really hard. And thankfully, the support that I had and then the encouragement I had from my mentors really helped me get through that. But I think I definitely don't want to, play off AmeriCorps as an easy experience. I think there are many, many challenges that are a part of it, but those challenges are what make the program so strong. I don't think that I would be in the positions I am today or the educator that I am today without the independence and room for failure and challenge that my AmeriCorps experience gave me.
Always very important. That's really great. I mean, gosh, why wasn't I an AmeriCorps member? This sounds amazing. Maybe I can still make it. I might still have some time.
You can, Chris. We're still hiring, Chris. We got positions for you. So
I saw the age range on some of those positions, and then I remembered that I have a full-time job. So I'll call myself fortunate in that respect. But I do have more questions for you. We got a few minutes left. Yeah, I don't know if the museum would let me dip out for an AmeriCorps service term. I lost my place now. Oh, here we go. We've got some current AmeriCorps members who are actually watching right now. In fact, a couple who are working out of the museum. So Aisha is asking, what advice would you give to new AmeriCorps members looking to develop curriculum materials?
That's a good question. I would definitely utilize your professional development money or opportunities if you have that in your program. I did. We could do 20% or less of our hours could be dedicated to professional development. I definitely pushed that completely to 20% during my AmeriCorps term, and maybe got chided from Nick a couple of times for doing too much professional development. But NCEE has some really great resources and like virtual and in-person trainings that I would highly recommend. Same with NAAEE, which is the National Association for Environmental Education. And developing curriculum as an informal or non-formal educator is very different than as a formal teacher. So I would definitely recommend learning about sort of the standards version for the environmental education world, because that can be really helpful in aligning it. I think it's like the 5 E's is what I learned during a webinar. And so I would definitely look into some of those opportunities. And also, just in general, I think it's a really good practice when you're doing programs to write out everything that you're planning to do and say during that program beforehand, just so that you can feel really prepared. And to me, that's sort of developing curriculum, because you're tracking what you're planning to do. And then you can go back and revise that and change it if something didn't work, or you want to change something so that it matches the age group better. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that use your professional development and make sure that when you're doing programs, you are tracking and writing out everything that you're doing.
Yeah, and I would add, if anybody listening to is an environmental educator that is an AmeriCorps member or starting off, you can email me, nick@ctnc.org, or reach out to Lisa Tolley at the North Carolina Environmental Educator office there at state government. Lisa did a lot of this work. Lisa helped both Project Conserve, the AmeriCorps program in the mountains, and our program back in 2017-18 to develop an AmeriCorps toolkit for environmental educators in like a role like Hannah's. Lisa, if you're listening, I need to email you. We probably need to update it because our program name has changed. AmeriCorps was different, and it's been 3 or 4 years. But it has been a great resource and tool, and we give that to all of our members every year when they start to give you some semblance of where to begin. And it's a very, very helpful toolkit that sets you up from your needs assessment to actually implementing your curriculum. I'm happy to share that with folks that need it. And then also, thank you for the reminder. Question, because I need to make sure Lisa we update it with all the new stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, Lisa's watching. I saw her in the chat. So good stuff. Okay, good question here in the chat. Because the environmental education focus is newer compared to traditional AmeriCorps programs, can you talk about what you've seen as the importance of environmental education to communities?
Yeah, I'll jump on that since we're going to focus a lot on there. It is newer, and it's also gone through iterations of having not staunch support from AmeriCorps HQ. And this is just because every so often AmeriCorps National changes priority focus. And so we are very lucky in the state of North Carolina that we have a commission that does value environmental stewardship and keeps it a priority focus here in the state because of the state's needs around environmental education from the mountains to the coast. It does change. It does change in iterations of, I would say, from a few, maybe when this kind of stuff got started 10 years ago to now, as we have more focus on climate change, more focus on community resilience, the life of individuals and property, environmental education is definitely getting more of a look in how it connects to other aspects of a community's livelihoods, around its economic, around its population, and around things more than just, especially our program. Typically K-5 education was the majority of our work when we first started. It has grown into really everybody. Environmental education and our members across the state has really developed programming for folks that are in high school, that are adults, that are elderly, that are families, and really have seen a sea change of where environmental education should be, even from when our program started seven years ago, I think now, or 8 years ago. So it has come a long way. It does still retain a lot of support and focus from AmeriCorps and our partners here in North Carolina. But then you have things, I think, like Jan's program, Conservation Corps, North Carolina, which has always been a fantastic aspect of AmeriCorps service and something that's always been I think, applauded and needed especially in our state parks and regional partners.
All right, excellent stuff. Okay, Cecilia is curious if you can speak to the concern of providing a rich enough experience, which we talked a little bit about, but also core requirements. And I think Cecilia might be watching from the Wildlife Resources Commission. So things like providing an office space, like what you got to have for an AmeriCorps member.
Sure. If you're Jan's program, you just need to be outdoors, I think, right, Jan, and have a good ability to put on sunscreen. Just kidding. But yeah, there's a difference, right? So if you're thinking of something like individual placement at the Wildlife Resources Commission or another agency like TJCOG or Highlands Catchers Land Trust or Triangle Land Conservancy and places like that, it does come down to the program you're applying to be a part of. Everybody has different requirements. There are a few things that AmeriCorps requires, period. The individual, again, for the most part, outside of high school crews, has to have a high school diploma, has to be over the age of 17, has to go through background checks. You have a 3-step background check process for that AmeriCorps member. And some programs, then after that, you go into the details of what a program requires. And that could be a host site match that you have to put up some additional funding to pay for that AmeriCorps member's salary, because we don't get all the money from the federal government to pay for these things. An office space, typically that's pre-COVID required. You must have an office space and a computer and it's place for them to access this work. Living in COVID still, that's adapted some to maybe just providing a laptop. We have a work from home structure with Resilience Corps North Carolina to have that oversight still needed. And then other things such as you're paying for that individual member's travel costs for your specific work stuff that you're doing for that member. So when Hannah would travel to these regional locations for TJCOG would, I think, maybe had you guys use a vehicle or reimburse your mileage. I forget what their policy was. Some organizations have cars they use, and then some also just reimburse mileage, things like that. It just comes down to the focus of your position's intent and how you're going to ask that member to serve and where. And so those responsibilities sometimes can be small or a little bit larger depending on that position.
Excellent stuff. Okay, let's see. Cecilia also wanted to shout out to the smart, engaged AmeriCorps participants in wild workshops. Always a great student to have in a workshop for sure.
Yep, I did
Thanks,
one
Cecilia.
of those when I was an AmeriCorps member.
Nice. I love this community coming together. Okay, let's see here. Emily's asking, do all programs have an age requirement?
I would say you have to be 18 to be an AmeriCorps member. In our program, and I think technically you can be any age. I know there's a senior corps to be a AmeriCorps. In our program, we really focus on the 18 to 27-year-olds. In our veterans program, 18 to 35, just because of the needs of a cohort. There's different kinds of needs that we want to be able to address in our members, and it's hard when you get a very large age group when we're working in our particular program. That may not be true of all programs.
Yeah, no, it just depends, honestly, on the program you're applying to. I would say majority of AmeriCorps programs are looking for, not really looking for, but because the wages are not fantastic, and then your civil education work isn't as attractive to folks that might be over 30 or 35 or older, you're typically going to have kind of a self-selected population of folks applying for those positions between 18 and 30-ish. I will say we've had plenty of folks that have looked at AmeriCorps for our program as a second career. We've had folks that have come to us that have been 50 or plus that have used this 6-month or year opportunity to then leverage into a career in public service at a county government, in another nonprofit. And it just depends on really the position, really what you're trying to bring in for your community, for that location, but also the work that needs to get done. So it does depend, but like Jen said, typically it is an 1827, 1830-year-old kind of range that you have for folks that are doing at least environmental education. If you spread that out outside of AmeriCorps, you will just the family of folks that are in AmeriCorps grows exponentially when you start getting outside of environmental education, because you do things like mentoring, you do things like poverty alleviation, habitat restoration, like building homes, and teaching folks like Teach for America, that just keeps growing.
Networks and communities. That's what it comes down to. Okay, let's see. It looks like I'm over time, but I'm going to throw Rebecca's question as the last one to you. As an agency hoping to host an AmeriCorps member soon, what advice do you have for our agency to be an effective mentor?
From the
Hannah, you had it.
I'll do from the member perspective. I think the most successful AmeriCorps members have mentors at their host site who are really excited about having an AmeriCorps member and have the time and energy to train them in well. So it's a big commitment up front for the first, I would say 2.5 months, just getting that AmeriCorps member onboarded, used to the work environment, making sure they have everything they need, supporting them through their transition into the organization. And so I know some people who didn't have that support at the beginning, it was really tough. So definitely look at your work schedule and your project load and make sure that you have the time to mentor, or someone on your staff has the time to mentor an AmeriCorps member. I think that's really important.
And from the program side, I echo Hannah's sentiments. In our program, we have definitely a strong application that asks host sites to tell us how you're planning on supporting this person. How are you going to mentor them? Are you committed to the time it takes? Because at least for our program, essentially, they're your full-time AmeriCorps member. We are not going to be directing them to do any of our things for CTNC while they're serving you. We do have our own trainings and AmeriCorps life-related opportunities, but they're your employee for the most part. Employee, not technically, but that's what we say. And so we do look for folks that have that strong affinity for mentoring people that are coming up into this field. That are not going to ghost out on responsibilities or oversight. They're not going to just say one thing and do another. And there's always challenges in AmeriCorps programs. AmeriCorps members are people just like you and me, and the site supervisors are also people. And in the end, we really try to build a program, and I think most programs that are successful do build that trust and that bond between all of us. Understand that we're in this together, and what are the things that we need to make sure we're still doing to have everybody have a really good experience and get meaningful things done for the community. And that is always one of the most important parts of AmeriCorps service.
And I'll just add, I agree with all those. And I would say what AmeriCorps is not is a temp agency. And if you have that attitude, then it is not the right program for your needs. It is about relationships. It is about capacity building. It is about having an experience for both your agency or office because you have this new person coming in with great ideas and passion and a lot of service minded purpose. And for that member, it's about getting to have this mentoring experience. So I think the biggest frustration that we have ever run into is somebody just treating one of our members like they should be a temp.
Great advice. Nick, Jan, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and expertise on today's program. Really glad that we could have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Good to see some friendly faces too. So have a great day, everyone.
All right, folks. Hey, we'll see you again next Wednesday at noon for another edition of the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Next week, we're going to be hearing from Matt Bertone. He's an entomologist at North Carolina State University. He's been on this show several times before. He's going to be talking about wasps and bees that dig the ground. He's also an incredible insect photographer. So it's going to be great. Don't miss it. We're going to learn a lot and have a good time. That's next Wednesday at noon, right here at the museum's YouTube channel and Facebook page. So if you're not already, go ahead and follow the museum on social media. We're at Natural Sciences on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you're watching on YouTube, so you could just click subscribe and then get a notification when we go live with the next program. I know you want to. It's cool stuff. You can also follow the Office of Environmental Education on Twitter and on Facebook. I know at least on Twitter, they are at North Carolina EE. That's their handle. And you can get more information about the Office of Environmental Education at their website, which is eenorthcarolina.org. Until next time, everybody, take care, stay safe, keep your community safe, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye, everybody.